Today's video is brought to you by AlmostHeaven.com. Handcrafting at-home saunas since 1977. Want better sleep, less stress, and faster recovery? Now's the perfect time. Shop saunas, cold plunges, hybrids, and accessories. Use our exclusive code at checkout to save 5%. Link below.
Wouldn't it be great in life if we had a clearly defined set of roads like a Rand McNally map where we knew how to go from A to B because it was right there with the legend, the key, and all that great stuff? Unfortunately, our map that we look at in life is like a pirate map. We have a destination in mind, and that's where the reward is, the treasure is. But sometimes we don't know how to get there because we don't have the tools or skills necessary to find that final treasure map. At least the gold at the end of the rainbow. And today our topic is X marks the spot. And because we're at the letter of X, so I think we got creative with that one, Bo. How do we get to our final destination on that treasure map?
Yeah, David, I want to talk directly to the word there, because there is what we're talking about today in our conversation of X marking the spot. Well, the spot is actually there. And there is different for each one of us. It's the path in which we take to arrive that we want to discuss today. And as you and I were talking before we started recording, we all grew up watching pirate movies where a band of rogue warriors were out searching for hidden treasure. They were on the open sea. They were all in ships. They were terrorizing companies, all making their way to the ahoy matey, looking for the buried treasure, the hidden treasure. And, we thought it was great because we were little kids and it was entertaining and it was pirates. But ultimately, I think there's a lesson to be learned from that search, that journey that these pirates were on, is that they were using in what they thought was the best way to arrive at that X on the map. Because what we always heard as movie watchers was that X marks the spot. And the spot at which these pirates were identifying was the location of the buried treasure. Whereas in our lives, we're not necessarily searching for treasure with gold and jewels and rubies, but I think there is something that we're all looking for, whether we realize it or not. We certainly do not want to get to the end of our lives living the subject matter of U2's famous song, "I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For." We do not want to exhaust the precious time that we have on this planet in a hopeless search for meaning. Our hidden treasure, as we apply it to each and every day, is that purpose that we were uniquely created for. Now, purpose is a word that you and I have been very intentional about using along the course of this series, because purpose is something that we all have the ability to possess. Unlike perfection, none of us were perfect. None of us ever will be perfect. But imperfection is not an excuse not to seek out our purpose, or in this topic of conversation, our X marks the spot, or our hidden treasure.
What I love about this topic is that everybody has their own X, their own there. And we all are striving to get to that final destination. And you had something you told me earlier. We're trying to look for that sweet spot between, I think you said, talent and potential, or talent and passion. I'd love to hear you expand on that.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes the world such an interesting place, is that we're all so unique. I was watching a commercial last night, and there was a quick cameo of the world record holder who juggles 3 balls as he runs a marathon. And he's sponsored by Marriott. And so it was a Marriott commercial, and it showed him sprinting through the lobby, juggling balls. And the point of the whole commercial is, we are fast enough to accommodate your needs. And I'm sitting here looking at this and it's like, wow, what a great story. That guy's absolutely passionate about what he's doing. And there's no doubt he's talented. Who can run a marathon at super warp speed juggling 3 balls. Well, that was a unique case. But to answer your question, the reason that life is so interesting and some would say so complex is that our purpose is not always perfectly evident to us when we grow up, when we're small. We go through transitions in life, and transitions is very important. Perhaps we could have addressed that when we're on our T, because unless we properly transition from one stage of our life to the next, we will be stuck living our life in hindsight rather than looking forward. If we live out our glory days in our teenage years, where we're retelling stories of the high school gridiron well into our 50s, what kind of life is that to live? If we're recounting our days where we shot a 12-point deer or we caught a 50-pound bass and we never had the opportunity to do it again, well, each time we tell that story, the deer gets bigger, the fish gets larger, and ultimately becomes a lie because we settled for what we were able to accomplish in the past, thinking that we've already used all of our potential up. And in that case, our passion becomes less and less and less. And we start to settle for what's normal, for what's routine, and we stop searching for what it is that we were created for. Our hidden treasure becomes less and less meaningless, and we certainly have less and less interest in finding that X, which signifies the crossroads between, as you said, our passion and our talent.
So it's continuing to strive for something new and not resting on your laurels or not accepting the previous accomplishments, continuing on. Because sometimes in these movies we see they find the map that has the X at the end, and that X is more or less a clue for the next X. So you have to keep on going and not to say, okay, I found it. Maybe you haven't found it.
Absolutely. And I love how you use the word clues, because clues are key indicators that we're on the right track, or at least they are refreshers to keep us energized as we pursue. Because how do we ever know if we've arrived if we don't know what we're looking for? Well, what are some signs that we're on the right track? Well, number one, are we interested? Are we engaged? Are we receiving positive feedback from those around us? How do we know what it is we're good at? How do we know what our talents are? Well, are we willing to refine them? Are we willing to practice? Are we willing to develop? Are we willing to stay on the search for the hidden treasure? Because if we're not willing to develop our talents, or in other words, if our passion is not there, we certainly will not continue to pursue it. So why even continue in the path that is going to lead to nowhere? In some cases, we see pirates searching for hidden treasure and they find booby traps, that cause them to be put into some trap where they're hung up, by the ceiling by their feet, or there's a trap door and they're caught in a cave. And, those are setbacks. And do we settle for those setbacks, or do we treat them as set-ups? Again, this X marking the spot is very individualistic, but it absolutely requires discipline, which, if you think about discipline from a matter of time and space, well, as we continue to pursue our potential, our passion grows as long as we commit the time, which are physical hours in the day, in the week, in the month, and the space where we give ourselves boundaries throughout the day. We clear our schedules, we commit, we tell others, we make ourselves accountable. Hey, this is going to lead to the development of our potential. And if we give ourselves the time, we give ourselves the space, ultimately that purpose is going to be pursued to the point of as close to perfection as possible.
Boy, I love this topic because as we draw to the end of this series, we can reflect back on all the other topics we've talked about. Because one thing that comes to mind when you're talking about how do we know we're there, or how do we know that we're on the right path, and we can draw on our mentors or the people around us. If we continue on this X marks the spot treasure map, rarely do people do this alone. They have a team with them, or other pirates that are on the path to find this treasure. So that's one thing we talked about in the past. If you can just expand on how this is not a solitary road that we're on. We have other people that are helping us along the way, even though it may feel a little bit on the selfish side.
Dave, that is so true. And I'm thrilled you used the word mentor. Whereas my position on this whole pursuit is that our purpose is rooted in service. In other words, we were created as human beings to give of ourselves. When we are at our happiest is when we are making the lives of those around us better. Now, that does not happen by the road of self-indulgence. You think about those who are completely self-centered, those who only care about the interest of themselves. We know that self-indulgence, there's only so much money, there's only so many vacations, there's only so many $100 t-shirts that we can buy before we start to become consumed with consumption. And ultimately, that is going to lead to self-sabotage. Whereas you think about the happiest people in the world, and I actually read a study just yesterday talking about professions throughout the world, is that consistently those who report the highest level of happiness are those professions that teach, those professions that protect, and those professions that care. Teaching, protecting, and caring, which if you think about it, those are all about other than yourself. It's that the greatest fulfillment in life is when you volunteer, when you become a mentor, because then you're sharing a bit of yourself with someone other than yourself, and it forces you to remove focus from what's going on in your life to, hey, I want to pour what I've learned. I want to give advantage to my past experience to this person in my life whom I'm now choosing to mentor. I think that has everything to do with the phenomenal success of the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program. And it's the very same reason that I myself, which we've discussed before, have a personal board of directors, which is the fancy way of saying I have 4 mentors in my life who I look up to, who I respect, who I admire in many different ways. I make myself completely accountable to them. And these aren't rocket scientists. These aren't innovators. These aren't scientists. These are simply men that are further down the path of life than I am. And I stop and I ask them questions. And because they see a developing passion inside of me for what it is that they've been able to accomplish, not because they're smarter, but because they're older and wiser, and I've stopped to ask a question, that mentor in them is going to stop and answer that question. And I know without a doubt that they are fulfilled in life seeing my development as I pursue my potential or as I pursue my X.
And I think as we, again, are getting closer to the end of this, we can draw lessons from the past, and using the analogy of you come across a booby trap, or your path has been sabotaged by someone before you. This topic we talked about before is, as long as failure is not final, keep going. And I know that you probably have something you can say about that.
Well, absolutely. Failure is a sign that you're on the right track, because you're actually putting your potential to the test. Because keep in mind, unpursued potential is wasted talent. An idea without action is a distraction. And that idea is what we think we might be good at. Again, we define potential as the difference between where we are now and where we desire to be. And anytime there's a gap there, there is no excuse we shouldn't be closing that in the form of pursuit. As we attempt to close that gap, we may fail. It might be harder than originally anticipated. When I became a father, I completely underestimated the amount of time and attention and work that it would take to be a dad. I suck up to this point. My boys turned four months old today, and I'm not any better today than I was when I started. But I'm not walking away, and I'm continuing to pursue it I'd like to think I'm a little bit better at feeding the boys when I get to feed them, at calming them down when they're losing their minds and all they want is their mama. I'm convinced that I'm raising two terrorists that want to take over the world, but I'm continuing to pursue that. And I'm not going to give up. And in this case, obviously, I don't have a choice to give up, but I think the life lesson applies is that the more tenacious we are, the more that we can turn our frustrations into opportunities that allow us to look past failure to the destination, which is fantastic, to continue using F's, then we're going to be more committed to searching out and seeking that hidden treasure, which is our potential lived out, which we call our purpose.
I was listening to a talk radio show yesterday on a long drive, and one of the analogies they gave was a reflection on something we've talked about in the past, and it was a sports radio show, and they were talking about a certain quarterback, and he's a rookie in the NFL, and they were giving an evaluation after only 2 games, and the evaluation was not based on how well the quarterback did during his win, but it was during his defeat that they really recognized the potential in this athlete and how he reacted to the challenge of the game. They weren't going to win, but that's what the back and forth commentary was. I want to see what happens when he's up against the clock or after that hard sack or that interception. And that showed a lot of character. And we've talked about that too, of bouncing back and reacting, because of those failures are really great lessons. You have to fail, and this is what this rookie quarterback is learning. I got to fail because that's going to help me learn. Not the guy who won, who's 2-0, because what did he learn? I learned how to win. Well, what do you do when you lose?
Absolutely, because life is not what happens to you, but how you react to it. In the case of 2 wins, well, that's life according to plan. So there's really no opportunity for growth, for overcoming. And adversity is a tremendous advantage if we can just keep it in proper perspective. And in the case what you just mentioned, a loss is not appetizing. A loss does not sit well. So how do we react? One thing that I've always loved is the notion that I've heard: character is who you are when no one is watching. What are you doing when all eyes are not on you? Who are you becoming in the background, in the shadows? If I were to ask the sum total of your 5 closest, not necessarily friends, but closest associates that are in observation of you, will they all agree on what kind of guy that you are?
Yeah. Well, this is what a great topic. This is one of those topics that encompasses a lot of the topics we've talked about in the past, and great idea. And I hope people find that sweet spot on their path in life to that wherever there is.
Keep searching, baby. That's the key.
All right. All right, Bo Parrish, great talk. Thanks, buddy.
Looking for a great at-home sauna at a great price? Get 5% off any indoor or outdoor sauna, cold plunge, or infrared sauna from Almost Heaven with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at checkout. For over 40 years, Almost Heaven saunas have been trusted as the top American home sauna manufacturer. Almost Heaven saunas deliver high-quality products and firmly stands behind the holistic benefits the sauna brings to your mind and your body. Again, get 5% off any order with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at almostheaven.com. There's also a direct link below this video.